accidental discharge of firearms. Firearms, which are modern in nature, have very good safety arrangement and hence such cases are very rare. But they do occur, and the reasons for the accidental discharge could be any one of the following. Number one, it may have a less trigger pull and that may incidentally or accidentally be pushed by any source. Number two, sometimes the safety mechanism gets jammed with the result that the system fails and the discharge takes place accidentally. Sometimes the factors are absolutely different than the mechanism inside the firearm. To cite an example, a farmer had kept a shotgun behind his tractor while he was driving the same. At some stage, he thought he might get a rabbit in the jungle and he may fire at him. It so happened that he took his tractor backwards and the gun got entangled with some of the branches of a prickly shrub. And when he started coming forward for plowing in his field, the trigger got pulled and his back side of the head was badly injured and he was killed as an accidental discharge. So these cases cannot be ruled out, though they are extremely rare. In another case, I cite a person said that the victim threatened him with a sword. He then showed him his gun to frighten him. The victim, according to him, struck his gun, which accidentally got discharged, killing the victim. The story was proved wrong by forensic scientists when they showed that sword was incapable of creating a discharge in the manner in which description has been given by him. Moreover, it was not possible for the sword to give a tool mark on the barrel. To cut the story short, the thing was proved absolutely wrong and the victim was murdered by the accused.
Learning outcomes. After studying this module, you shall be able to know about accidental discharge of firearms, about the causes of accidental discharge, and about some illustrative cases related to accidental firing. Let us start with introduction. Now, crimes related to firearms are of three types. Number 1, homicidal. Number 2, suicidal. Number 3, accidental. Homicidal and suicidal acts of firearm usage shows a malignancy and intention on the part of the firearm user, but in the accidental type crimes, it is nearly impossible to calculate any intention. There can be several reasons for accidental firing, which may not be calculated single-handedly. However, some reasons have been identified as a part of the firearm defects are discussed in this chapter. According to the survey in India, the cases of death due to accidental firing is very common because of easy availability of improvised firearms. It is often come across in the news about deaths due to accidental firing in wedding ceremonies and other similar functions. Moreover, lack of proper knowledge of handling weapons is also a common reason for accidental cases related to firearms. Now, let us discuss causes of accidental discharge of firearms. The materials are not always of the best quality. It is not unusual for there to be sufficient play in the mechanism for the firing pin to touch the primer. Dropping the weapon inadvertently, striking the hammer will often accidentally discharge such a weapon when it is in the half-cocked safety position. As discussed earlier, there may be several reasons for accidental firing cases, but to conclude the fault in broader way, some causes for concern are discussed. Number 1 would be mishandling of firearms. It has been often seen that firearms possessed by the user is not used or kept properly. It has been frequently observed that the user with lack of knowledge of handling the sophisticated instrument may cause unintentional damage to it by leaving it unattended or improperly attended. Now, second would be manipulation in the internal mechanism of firearm. Some users are so eager to experiment with the weapons in their possession that they manipulate the mechanism of firearm according to their preferences. Most commonly, the barrel are shortened or the trigger pull is lowered or even sometimes unnecessary greasing is done to provide smooth motility of the bullet. All these efforts makes the weapon prone to accidental damage, especially in the case of shotguns where the barrel is shortened off and gunpowder cartridges are used in place of smokeless powder cartridges. There is a strong possibility of bursting of cartridges due to excessive release of gases. Number third would be inadvertent trigger pull. In general, this is very difficult, if not possible to prove one way or the other, whether it is inadvertent or otherwise. Numerous cases are on record of a violent fight during which a person holding the weapon has been violently thrown back against the wall with a claimed inadvertent discharge of the weapon. An excellent piece of work has been by Brian J. Hurd using volunteer under controlled conditions to test the probability of this happening. In the major city of tests carried out, unless the trigger pressure is exceptionally low, it has been found that for self-loading pistols and revolvers in the single action mode, there is little tendency for the trigger to be pulled. If anything, the person holding the weapon generally releases the trigger. For revolvers in the down action mode, it has been found that there is no tendency at all for the trigger to be pulled. It is worth noting those conditions under controlled tests and those when there is a violent confrontation or when one person fears for his life are completely different. One significant part of the work of B.J. Hurd is that there is approximately 75% chance that an experienced shooter will inadvertently release the trigger if an attempt is made to pull the gun away from him, whereas in the case of an inexperienced shooter it drops to 65%. Now, point 4 would be less trigger pull. Although the accepted commercial and military trigger pulls varies tremendously, but the following are considered as acceptable in a common. For .22 rimfire rifle, it is 3 to 4 pound. For military rifles, it is 4 to 7 pound. For revolvers of single action, it is 4 to 6 pound, and revolvers of double action, it is 10 to 15 pound. Whereas self-loading pistols have 4 to 8 pounds and shotgun has 4 to 5 pounds. The most frequently it is observed that a person acquainted to a particular kind of weapon with used to trigger pull accidentally pulls the trigger of a different weapon which may have less trigger pull, causing accidental discharge. Now, number 5 would be faulty ammunition. Defective ammunitions may also cause accidental discharge of the firearm. The improper mixture of propellant or wet mixture may cause slow ignition of the propellant, which can cause irregular release of gases and may also cause explosion. It has been observed that to ensure more lethality, the bullet core or the pellets are distorted, which can cause damage to the barrel resulting bursting of the barrel. Now, point 6 would be faulty safety mechanism. Due to improper handling or manipulation or sometimes manufacturer's fault, the safety mechanism of the firearm gets malfunctioned. This malfunctioning is, however, very dangerous and cause accidental discharge even when the safety switch is turned on. Point 7 would be environmental factors. Besides human interventions and manufacturing faults, the environmental factors are also responsible for the accidental discharge of firearms. Blockage of the barrel or the chamber with mud, soil, water, or other extraneous materials may cause bursting of barrel. Depositing of rust in the firing mechanism is also a cause of concern. There are numerous recorded cases of twigs snagging on the trigger of loaded shotguns and rifle. Now, let us have a look on case studies. Case 1. In an elite case of accidental discharge involving a disputed shot in the head of a woman resulting in her instantaneous death, the husband claimed that the gun went off accidentally while unloading the weapon in a room. The alleged made in Italy weapon was costly and a side by side 12-bore DBBL gun, which was not used much. The trigger pull test showed that the right and left trigger required a pressure of 4 and 4.5 pounds respectively, which was in accordance with this type of weapon. On disassembling the lock mechanism, it was found that the steel bends of the lock mechanism had not been case hardened during the manufacturing process, which resulted decrease in pressure with subsequent firing of the weapon. Although the weapon was in good working order and not at all prone to accidental discharge, when received, there were doubts as to the changing characteristics of the weapons, lock mechanism, and the case was dismissed. Case 2. In an alleged burglary case, the house owner armed himself with an old double barreled shotgun and confronted the burglar. A fight ensued and the house owner was violently thrown back against a door frame. At that stage, the weapon discharged, blowing most of burglar's head. The house owner claimed that the weapon was in the safety or rebound position and that the gun had discharged accidentally on the weapon hitting the door frame. On examining the scene of crime, a deep impression of one of the weapon's hammers was found in the woodwork of the door frames. This, coupled with the fact that the half-cocked bend was worn to the extent that the firing actually rested on the cartridge primer, was enough to show that there was no intent on the part of the house owner and that it was indeed a case of accidental firing. Now, let us discuss case 3. In another case of recent origin, a person started examining a self-loading pistol in an open space. The person pressed the trigger a couple of times. The firearm did not go off. As there was no reaction to the pressing of the trigger, he got surprised. Meanwhile, the owner, who was watching from a nearby place, saw the person examining, tampering the weapon, rushed to snatch the pistol, and while snatching it went off, killing the owner. It was considered a case of homicide murder. The firearm was examined by an expert who found it defective. The firearm should have worked only after the safety catch gets pressed in the grip and pulling off trigger taken place. During the process of snatching of the pistol, the safety grip was accidentally pressed and the pistol went off, in spite of the fact that trigger had not been pressed. It could happen only if the weapon had been defective, otherwise it should not have happened. Case 4. This is a case of accidental discharge while holstering a weapon. This case involved a police officer who was trying to insert his Colt revolver, held in his right hand, into the holster which was in his left hand. The weapon discharged, taking a large portion of the holster and the bullet through the palm of the left hand. A careful examination of the internal surface of the holster and a gun handling test on his right hand showed that his index finger had been on the trigger at the time of firing and that the weapon was almost fully holstered. For some reason, he had his finger in the trigger guard which holstering the weapon. The act of trying to force the weapon into the holster whilst his finger was snagged on the top of the holster fired the weapon. Case 5. In a draw accidental discharge case, a police officer who was found in a men's toilet while a hole in his right foot. His statement said that he had taken his gun out of the holster to disentangle his lanyard. A lanyard is a piece of thick string, usually with a whistle or a knife attached to it, and when he reholstered the weapon, it went off, shooting him in the foot. His explanation was that the lanyard had caught on the trigger and fired the weapon. A number of test firings made with exactly the same type of holster showed that the weapon must have been almost completely out of the holster at the time firing occurred. In that position, it was impossible for the lanyard to have pulled the trigger. It was plainly obvious that he has been practicing quick draws in front of the mirror and had inadvertently pulled the trigger. Another case, that is case number 6, it would be highly unlikely for the soft touch of a fingerprint distinct brush to have sufficient force to discharge a weapon whilst the trigger was being reached for prints there was, however, an incident where the fingerprint officer, having found nothing on the trigger, proceeded to use the trigger to steady the weapon whilst dusting the buttstock. Sufficient force was applied to the trigger to discharge one barrel of the shotgun. The shot went straight through the ceiling and in the room above, much to the consternation of the police officer who was reaching for evidence. Case 7. In a case where a tractor driver shot by his own gun, a farmer who kept his shotgun behind the back seat of his tractor just in case he saw a rabbit. While backing the tractor top to starting a plowing run, the gun became entangled in some brambles. On starting forward, one barrel discharged, completely removing back of his head. The task of pulling the trigger, which is normally done by a finger, was carried out by parts of bushes in this case. Case 8. In an interesting case, a person who had gone for hunting did not return to his house on the same day. His dead body was found in a jungle when pursuit for the person was made. The dead body got identified by his known people who suspected it to be a case of murder. The body had gunshot injury on the upper right part of the abdomen. The direction of injury was upward as well as inward and above the hip bone. Several possibilities were considered, but the injury could be caused in two different ways. The gun could go off when the person, when alive, was standing with his gun resting on the ground on the right hand side and its muzzle touching the sides of the injury. In the alternate theory, the injury could have been caused when person was lying on the ground and other person, the attacker, fired at him while the top was lying on the ground. This seems to be not logical since the attacker's aim is to kill and not select suitable or unsuitable sets. However, the gun was found prone to accident and the theory of involvement of any other person gets falsified. Now, let us summarize this chapter. In this chapter, we have learned that the problem whether a given firearm is prone to fire accidentally assumes great importance in many cases. It guides an investigating officer to pursue his investigation in a particular direction, whether a particular killing is homicidal, suicidal, or accidental. We have also come to learn that the materials are not always of the best quality. It is not unusual for there to be sufficient play in the mechanism for the firing pin to touch the primer. Along with it, we have come to know that in general this is very difficult, if not impossible, to prove one way or the other whether it is inadvertent or otherwise. And at last, we have learned that numerous cases are on record of a violent fight during which A person holding the weapon has been violently thrown back against a wall with a claimed inadvertent discharge of the weapon.